So 7Hz's is back with their flagship, and I've got mixed feelings about the Aurora. But let's start with the pros first. It's very detailed, resolution is great, it's a slight bump over the DUSK in terms of the technical aspect, and it's very OCD in the treble, especially with like hi-hats and the cymbals. The imaging is sharp, and the attack is fast and tactile, giving you that sparkly treble head presentation. You're bombarded with lots of micro details, and the imaging makes it feel like you're getting hit by like information all around you. You feel like the sharp imaging all around the headspace. There's a lot of dynamic contrast as well, giving you that energetic, slight V-shaped feeling where the separation of the highs and the lows are very like stand out from one another. The Aurora definitely emphasizes the higher frequency more. It's like a bright, kind of like treble head set, but it doesn't mean the low end isn't good either, because it is. And for once, the marketing material actually checks out. Like 7Hz claim, the driver provides well textured and powerful lows, but in a controlled and professional tuning, and with that I do agree. The bass is well controlled, it's not boomy, it doesn't bleed, but it's not anemic either. You still have the detail and texture in there, the impact is still enough, and overall it's still satisfying. Now of course the decay and the reverb and like the air in the bass slam isn't as prolonged or as obvious as some of the like the bass headsets, but it's not warm, you know, it has enough body and fullness to the sound. Not the thickest, but it doesn't distort the vocals, and overall it's just good quality bass. But the main star of the show is in the upper mids and the treble, where the Aurora really delivers on that like sparkly, OCD, trippy presentation. It's like a mini mess. I would say the Aurora does indeed have quote unquote special sauce, like the mess, especially in the treble, like the aggressive in your face like micro details, the sharp imaging, but there are some issues. Number one, these are definitely a mid volume set around 70 dBs or so depending on the song. Do not blast these unless you want hearing loss. I mean, of course, unless you already have it, then you know, sure, go for it. But for the vast majority of people, do not crank these up, they will hurt. And even though the peaks and dips does give the Aurora that like contrasty feeling with the highs and the lows, this does mean, however, it is not very smooth and it does not scale very well. Energetic genres like K-pop and J-pop needs to be listened at like a lower volume, mid to low volume, because the peaks around 3K, 5K, 7K, and 10K, like all those combined, does get too much on songs like Butterfly by Luna and Say It by Yorushika. Second, the contrast also means there's masking in the dips shadowed by the higher peaks, and it doesn't really give you that like powerful lockout in the voices. For example, the vocals on the Aurora isn't fully extended, and it feels like there's like holes or blockades somewhere in the upper mids on songs like Hello, Pensalo Diaz. It doesn't feel like extended, it doesn't feel like super powerful, and it feels a little bit stuck, which checks out because looking at the graph, yep, there are multiple dips and holes in the upper mids. Now the vocals aren't bad by any means, but it's not like top tier vocals, right? And 7Hz does try to counter this by boosting the 1.5K, giving your listener that feeling of extension, or at least like the illusion of extension, by pushing the vocals more forward. It feels more detailed, like more audible, right? But this instead just makes the vocals sound shouty with more energetic tracks and a bit congested on bassier songs because it is more forward and it takes up more of the headspace. But this doesn't mean the Aurora is like bad. It's actually very enjoyable with like slower indie acoustics and even some ballads. Like Taylor's new album actually sounds great on the Aurora. The extra bit of energy brings more color and liveliness to the tracks, and the album itself is like smoother. There's not a lot of electronic elements. Taylor isn't also going ham on the vocals, right? She's just singing normally, so all those combined actually works out in the Aurora favors to have more energy to bring that more like engagement to the sound. And classic rock in the 90s, 80s, rock bands in general also sound good on these because there's enough mid bass for the drum section, and with the Aurora highlighting these cymbals, the hi-hats, this then gives you that like sparkly OCD experience with the imaging that's like very immersive and very trippy. Hip-hop also sounds surprisingly fine on these. Like the Auroras wouldn't be my first pick, but it's actually less fatiguing than the Titans in the snares because like of the dip, there's not that much 5K energy, but in my opinion, something like the Duschenko or the Hype 4 would work better here, especially if you want something like warmer and bassier. Then the Duschenko is a better fit and it's the better value as well. But before we move on, this video is sponsored by you guys. You guys know the drill. I buy most of the stuff I review in order to try to stay, you know, unbiased as much as possible, but I'm not rich, I can't buy everything, so I do need your guys' help, and you can help me by becoming a channel member. It's only $5 a month. I do regular giveaways there, but back to the video. Now versus the DUSK, I would actually take the Aurora because even though it's not as like safe and smooth as the DUSK, it's also not as boring and unoriginal either. Like when I'm listening to the DUSK, I don't really feel anything. Like it's a good IEM, like it works good for K-pop, J-pop because if the upper mids are tamer, helps like less fatiguing, right? But in my opinion, if I wanted an all-rounder, I would just grab the Nova. That's not only 2 times less, but also in my opinion is more flexible and more versatile when it comes to being an all-rounder, because it does have that upper mids extension and it feels fuller in the upper mids. And as an alternative to the Nova, I would grab something like AURORA that's more different and contrasts the sound, has a different type of like presentation to the music, and just a little bit more different than just being an all-rounder. So even though the AURORA is like more imperfect than the DUSK, it does bring that special sauce to the table with its imaging, the treble, and really helps it stand out from the rest of the $300, the $400 IEMs. Versus the Hype 4, the AURORA is a lot more energetic, it's sharper in the note transients, it feels more detailed, and again it has that sparkly sauce to it, whereas the Hype 4 is a lot smoother, it scales the best out of the 3, and in terms of like the bass impact, the texture is more pronounced and like the slam is more pronounced on the Hype 4. It sounds fuller, and the Hype 4 would be my recommendation for like hip-hop, rock, R&B, pop stuff. It's just a more engaging version of the DUSK without sacrificing the mids and the separation, because the bass glide does like fix itself back at 300Hz, so it doesn't really get in the way of the mids. Because the DUSK to me is just too safe in the low end to be really fun and engaging like the Hype 4, nor is it sparkly enough like the AURORA to have like that special sauce, nor is it flat enough in the bass or the upper mids to be like a true clean neutral like the Performer 8 for example. So the DUSK just doesn't really stand out in the current market. Like it's a good all-rounder safe pick kind of for J-pop, K-pop, but it just becomes the jack of all trades and master of none. Like if you want something clean and neutral but still has that good triple extension, you can still go for the Performer 8. It's still a pretty decent IEM even now, and it's pretty much like a straight line with a slight emphasis in the cymbals, kind of like a less V-shaped version of the AURORA, and just more neutral and balanced in general, and just more different than the DUSK. And as for the vocals, the Studio 4 and T2 would still be my choice here over the AURORA. If you listen at mid volume and like the harmonious sound, then the Studio 4 would be better. You know, it's more open, cleaner, it's well balanced with no major like dips and peaks, no holes in the upper mids like the AURORA. Not as fun and OCD sounding, you know, not as sharp and imaging, you know, sparkly, but it's more traditional in its vocal presentation, and most people are gonna like it more. On the other hand, if you like more forward vocals and listen louder, then the T2 sounds more intimate, it's fuller, and it's more immersive because you can scale it up more. It's more balanced and it's more neutral like the Studio 4s, and in terms of like resolution, detail, you know, technical performance, whatever you want to call it, the AURORA will still be better than all of them, and that's where like the magic kind of happens. As for those looking to upgrade, if you're coming from the Phoenix Call, you know, something with a slight V shape or like a bright leaning sound, then I think you're gonna like the AURORA, as it's pretty much just that, but it's a better version of it, you know, better tech, better resolution, and you're just getting more of what you like. So all in all, I do like the AURORA for what it does. You know, for those who like that OCD sparkly treble presentation, this would be a good pick. I wouldn't recommend this as an all-rounder. If you want something like an all-rounder, the Hype 4, the Nova would be better, because this is a more like a niche specialty set because of the upper mids and the treble, and you know, the special sauce is indeed there. It reminds me of like a mini mess. However, it's just up to you whether or not you want to give it a shot, or you know, you just want to play it safe. And also I do recommend tip rolling these, because I tried them with like some other tips and they were like too sharp in the treble, the vocals, like the seal wasn't right, so I ended up using the stock tips that it came with, and it sounds pretty good. So you know, just a heads up. But that aside, I hope this review was helpful. Thanks for watching guys, and I'll see everyone in the next one. Shout out to Jeff Young, RoarXCat, Cat, Dom Q, Star Buccaneers, Joel Pink, This Call Scaldus, B_Urac, Mystic Spoon Attack, Oh Really, Walker Standard, User, Ernest, Contain Guava Juice Gain, Patrick, Bell Cell Kel, Rosa the Kelf, Perry Jat, Polly, Mr. Gorillas, Anto Risto, Giz Sang Young, Tomat Pafrache, Ed, Harry, Christopher, Federico, Name, and Henry. Thank you guys so much for the support.